Welcome to Cash Plays. And now your host, Bart Hanson.
Hello and welcome to Cash Plays. I am Bart Hanson. This week's episode, Coaching, Common Mistakes, and Stud with Paul Darden. After the break, a conversation with Paul Darden about 40 minutes long, going into some of the intricacies of stud, high-low, and stud. Paul, a very accomplished stud player, very well respected, used to play with Phil Ivey back in the day, and definitely worth taking a listen to after the break. Now, I call this week's episode Coaching and Common Mistakes because I actually coached somebody. There was a gentleman from New York City that contacted me last week who is a devoted listener to Cash Plays, and he wanted a coaching session. He was coming out to Commerce for a weekend, and I'd never really done it before, and I didn't hesitate, but I was just trying to figure out, the best way to go about doing it. And what I decided to do was actually sit behind him somewhat inconspicuously and write notes in my BlackBerry so that I could see his cards. And what we did was we did 2 hours of, me looking and seeing how he's playing, and then a 2-hour follow-up. And I have to tell you, I didn't realize how much I actually got out of coaching him. And we're going to get to 3 or 4 hands that this gentleman played because I think it really brings up some common mistakes that a lot of you might battle with at the low to mid stake levels. And this guy, we'll call him John. John plays mostly or 95% six max online, 50 cents a dollar and $1, $2. And he was really looking to help his live play because I guess he plays in some of the games around New York and at the Borgata. So I think this can perfectly apply to a lot of the audience. But even before we get into some of the hands, I want to go out and make a suggestion that if you have friends that are poker players or you yourself know somebody that's not necessarily, he could be at a better level than you, he could be at the same level, he could be at a worse level. I think you should try what I did this week, which is basically sit behind one of your buddies for an hour, kind of inconspicuously. Again, you never want to make it look like, you're doing anything or any type of coaching is going on. Take a BlackBerry, or I guess you could have a pen and a paper, and don't talk to them while they're playing poker. Just sit there like you were like some of those girlfriends that sit behind guys. Sit there and say nothing, and you take your own notes, and then talk about some hands that your friend played. And then if you have time, maybe he can do the same thing for you. He can sit behind you too as well. It might sound a little bit crazy, but I am actually going to start doing it with some of my close friends because of this coaching session that I did. You just get such a different feel for the game when you're not in the game, but you're observing the game and you can see somebody's hole cards. It was kind of like me when I used to do Live at the Bike. I could see everybody's hole cards. But if you sit behind somebody and from a different perspective can pick up what's going on the table and you can see his cards, and again, the same thing, if they're sitting behind you, they're going to have a different perspective on the game when you're actually sitting in the game. So if you have time, I think it's something that's worth it to try, and I'm going to start doing it a lot more. And, nowadays, it can't hurt, a general discussion with people that's similar to your ability or better, or even worse. It never hurts. You could help some of your friends. They could help you. So, again, I want to suggest that to everybody to give that a shot. As always, you can email the show, cashplays@pokerroad.com, and send a voicemail. And, man, we haven't gotten a good voicemail in here in a while. 877-836-ROAD, 877-836-ROAD. So, John, he played an okay session, but he made some mistakes that, again, I think are going to be common at the mid to lower stakes levels for guys coming in playing online, to live. And I've got 4 different things here, and I'm just going to go down in order. The first thing that I saw he did was call with implied odds type hands that you need to hit a big flop, and you're calling because of your stack size, like a suited connector. In this case, he called with ace-3 suited against a recent steamer. And what I mean by a recent steamer is a guy that's been losing at the table. Maybe he just lost the last pot. Maybe he doesn't have the greatest image in the world at the table. And the problem is, when you call with implied odds types hands against those players, a lot of people don't realize that those guys have very, very big opening ranges. And the specific hand that John called with against a guy that had just lost a big pot, he got stacked off. I was actually watching John play 5-10 at Commerce, which was, they changed the structure of 500 min to 1500 max. This guy had lost a $900 pot, and he had just rebought for 800, and he opened to 40 in third position, and John called with ace-3 of spades. Now, it's a marginal pre-flop call. He's getting about 20 times the raise size because his opponent had about an $800 stack. But again, the problem is that his opponent could be raising with 10-6 offsuit. You know, he could be raising with any number of hands. His range is not polarized because he was steaming. And I think a lot of people don't realize that when you're going to call with small pocket pairs even, any other types of implied odds hands, you have got to realize that who you are playing against. You would much rather call with a hand like that against a guy who is super tight and whose range is super polarized. And it's the same thing for aggressive players in late position, which is why you really shouldn't be, flat calling a super aggressive player's range in the cutoff with pocket threes out of the small blind. There's just no way that you can play that hand profitably. It's either really a raise or a fold, and, whatever you wanted. I mean, normally I fold, but depending on the situation, of course, you could raise. But to flat call there with a hand like that, there's just no way you can do it. So many things have to happen. Now, specifically with ace-X suited, I think John gets into a lot of trouble as opposed to even calling with like a 6-7 suited, because the guy is steaming, and the beauty of if you're playing well when you call with ace-rags suited wheel card, you should be able to be in position, and you should be able to be good enough to drop a flop if an ace comes, or drop the hand at some point by the flop or turn betting. So, he calls with ace-3 suited, and the board comes out ace-9-10. Well, the guy throws a bet out. Yeah, maybe you call one time, you see what happens. But now on the turn, if the guy throws another bet out, and he's a tight player, and you're fairly certain he would never bet here twice without an ace, then obviously it's easy to dump the hand. But against the steamer here, if you flop this weak ace, and he throws out a bet on the flop, and he calls, and now the turn's a blank, and it was draw heavy on the flop, and now he throws another big bet out, you're really in a quandary. Because you could still be good because of the fact that this guy has been losing, and he's playing a little bit crazy. So what do you do then? So even more so, I would stay away from ace-X suited against steamers, but any types of implied odds I'd stay away from against steamers. And the funny thing that happened was the board came out 10-8-5 with a couple of clubs. And the upfront steamer checked, and John checked behind. The turn paired the board. It was a 5. And the upfront steamer checked again. Now John came out and bet. And I asked him afterwards, I said, I'm assuming that you're bluffing there, because I thought the upfront steamer had, something like an ace-jack or an ace-queen. And he said, yeah, I was trying to get him off of some sort of hand. If you don't think you're bluffing, I think you can just check behind, because your hand has showdown value with ace-3. But in this case, he bet 100 into I think he bet 50 into about $100 bot, and the guy called. So now the pot's 250. And again, now another reason why an implied odds hands go down against a steamer is because it's that much more difficult just to take away the pot against a guy when you have nothing. Because now the guy calls the turn. I immediately thought he had a big ace, maybe an ace-jack or an ace-queen. And the river bricked off like a deuce or something, and the guy checked again. Well, now the pot's 250. Well, do you want to bluff this guy? He might call with ace-queen. John eventually ended up just giving up, and the guy had ace-queen. But it just goes to show you the problem with, again, playing those types of hands. You've got to realize who has been winning and who has been losing when you're playing live. That is one of the key things to live success, is picking on the right spots in the game. And a lot of the times, if you're not in a super fishy game, the right spots change through, how the game has been going for each individual person. So I want to keep everyone have that to be, keep that in mind. Second hand that I found interesting, that John, again, coming from a 6-max background online, he had a hand where he had pocket 7s in the small blind, and it got limped around 4 ways. And the guy on the button made it 55. Now, I was thinking to myself before he put the money in, I was like, oh, this is just a perfect spot. You're going to call in the small blind. You're going to start a cascading effect where everyone else is going to call, and you're going to see a $280 or $300 pot, and you're in for 55, and it's just so much set value. It's great. Your hand plays so well, raise size to stack size ratio, and how much money is going to get there in the pot. But to my surprise, John made a gigantic 3-bet to $210 from up front. Everybody else folded. Then the pre-flop raiser called. So the pot was about $250. The board came out 9-10-3 with 2 hearts. John made a $300 continuation bet, and the guy shoved for $780 total. So John was getting about 3.5 to 1 on the shove, but John correctly folded because there's just absolutely no way that you can call with structured hand analysis there. If half the time his opponent has overcards and a flush draw, it's about 50-50. The odds are about 1 to 1. The other half of the time, if he has any pair higher than 7s, John is a 9 to 1 dog. So again, it's fairly simple math. Half the time he's 1 to 1, half the time he's 9 to 1. So you take the average between 1 and 9, and you get about 4.5 to 5 to 1 that you would need for odds to call there. He's getting 3.5 to 1, and obviously, he couldn't get it. But I asked John, I said, what are you really looking for on the flop if you're going to play that hand like 7s like that? What's a good flop? And I think he said to me, well, what's a good flop that he doesn't hit a set with? Well, 6 deuce deuce. And I said, really? Well, what would happen if you made the $300 bet on a 6 deuce deuce board with a couple hearts and the guy shoved? And, John finally figured out that it's exactly the same thing. You still can't call. Once you make that re-raise with a mid-ish pocket pair like that, which has so much, again, if you had just flat called, would have, started this amazing cascade effect, and it would have been so great. But once he makes this re-raise here, and the guy calls, and he's forced to make a 60 or 70% continuation bet, he really can't call any raise. There's just no hands in the villain's range that he possibly can call with the pot odds that he's going to get. Now, people might say, well, yeah, he can raise and then bet the flop, and if the guy misses, he folds. Yes, you can do that, but he could also raise with any 2 cards in that spot and do that. My point being is that 7s in that spot, in essence, the way that he plays it, becomes deuce 8 or deuce 7 offsuit. Because what he's going to have to do is he's going to have to continuation that bet the flop, basically 300, and he's always going to have to fold to any raise. So the hand itself doesn't really have any value, except for the fact that he could hit a set with it. And I think that people, when they're in the 6-max mentality, they're always thinking, well, this guy's going to raise, so I'm going to re-raise and I'm going to take it down most of the time. But what you don't realize in full ring live play is that after 4 or 5 people have limped, normally, even at the higher levels, and I don't even do it, you're not raising it up on the button there with King 10, King Jack, hands like that. Maybe Ace King, maybe Ace Queen. But a lot of times, if you see several limpers in there, unless the guy is a maniac, aggressive player on the button, and he raises the button, he's not necessarily folding to a 3-bet a lot of the time, definitely way less than a 6-max live online. So keep that in mind. So with your mid-ish pocket pairs, just a perfect hand. Perfect hand for set value. And he could have called there with like a mid-ish suited connector, like an 8-9 or a 9-10 suited as well, where I think people, again, online might make the mistake, well, they'll 3-bet there out of a small blind with 9-10 or 8-9, when in fact, it's just a perfect spot where people had limped in behind him. Moving on to the third thing that I noticed about John. A couple limpers in late position, and John is in the big blind with pocket aces. So he raises it up, the pot, and the cutoff and the button call. And they were late position limpers. And the board comes out ace, jack, queen, rainbow. John checks. The cutoff bets 70% of the pot. The button folds. John calls. The turn's an ace. John has quad aces. John checks. Cutoff checks. The river's a 3. John bets 140 and the cutoff folds. And of course, I'm pulling my hair out behind him, thinking to myself, what is he doing? What is he doing? You know, again, back in the day when Dave Tuckman and I, we used to commentate live at the bike, we always used to say, you know, fast play everything. It's always the right way to play. And back at that time, back in 2005 and 2006, I really think that it was. I really think that the times that you try to massage a pot with slow playing usually almost always were wrong, because you could get so much value by always betting your hand. Now, at the lower levels and even at this level, I think the advice is pretty much the same, but of course it's a little bit different. I think that you should be slow playing some of the time. But mainly in these games, you want to go for maximum value. Now, if John had raised it out of the big blind and the board had come out ace deuce 8, ace deuce 7, rainbow, something like that, I think a case then could be made that you might check that out of the big blind. The reason being is that it's just so difficult for that to have hit anybody, because you have 3 aces. And if they did flop a hand, like I said, it's going to get in there anyways. But it's very, very difficult to get action because the ace is out there. But you've got to evaluate when you flop the nuts or you flop a set and you're thinking about how to bet it and how to play it. You've got to evaluate the board texture, just like when you're evaluating the board texture when you're trying to decide to make a continuation bet into 1 or 2 people. If you flop a set of aces on an ace, queen, jack board, I am probably betting that into 2 people 99.9999% of the time. And of course, the reason why I'm not saying 100% of the time is because nothing's 100% of the time in poker. But it just hits their range so hard. And the interesting thing about that hand with aces is that with that board, you know, sometimes you can fast play a hand by check raising. But with that board, I think aces is actually too strong to check raise. What I mean by that is if you lead out, you will definitely get hands to call you, draws to call you. Obviously, you're going to get weaker hands to call you. But if you check aces over there, and let's say the guy on the cutoff bet with bottom 2, he bet queen jack, and now you check raise him. Really, what can queen jack beat? When I flop 3 aces on that board, I'm trying to get the pairs and straight draws to call. And I think if I check raise them, they're going to fold their gut shots in pairs and straight draws. And if I bet out, hopefully the guy's got bottom 2. And that's really the only other big hand he can have, unless he flop king 10 there. And he really can't stand a check raise with bottom 2. And again, this is a unique situation on this particular board. But the point I'm trying to make is that you have to evaluate every single board that comes out when you're trying to figure out if you want to play it tricky or not. So, again, lead there on that board as opposed to check raise any street. And the funny thing is if he had come out and led for 75, and I think he made it 35 pre-flop, so the pot was 100. So if he came out and led for 75 and the guy called, well, now the pot's 250. Now when he makes 4 aces on the turn, it's really difficult for the guy to have anything. You know, if he's got queen jack, he gets counterfeited. You know, pairs and straight draws. There's $250 in the pot. You know, people would say, well, is that now it's time to slow play? Well, I think, yeah, you can check that. But I really, unless the guy is super, super aggressive, I just think it looks so obvious that you've got a big hand there. Honestly, into a $250 pot at the lower levels, when I'm always looking for value, I'll probably bet $50. I'll probably bet $50 and just hope the guy thinks, well, I can call $50 for my gut shot straight draw. I probably wouldn't check. Again, you're trying to figure out what the guy has. It's different. You know, it's a different type of situation when you flop, you know, top full house on a king 6-6 board, and you bet and get a couple of callers, and you're positive somebody has a 6, and now the turn's a 5, and the board was drawy, and now you check it, going for a check raise on the turn, and you're going to try to do something a little crazy on the turn because there's multi-way action. That's much, much different from this situation, where in essence, if you check that turn, it's almost like I just don't like it, because in order for that guy to have called the flop, he's got to have some piece of the flop that has showdown value, like a queen or a jack, and he's never betting the turn, I don't think, with a queen or a jack, unless he's super, super aggressive. So again, evaluate board texture, not just while continuation betting, after a pre-flop raise, but in every situation, especially when you're considering slow playing. Fourth thing, and this is the last thing before we go to break, that I saw John play a hand, or misplay a hand slightly. Pot had been limped around 5 or 6 ways. John had completed in the small blind with queen jack of diamonds. And the board came out queen 10-8 with 2 hearts. Queen of hearts, 10 of hearts, 8 of clubs. And John leads out for an 80% pot size bet. It gets folded around to the button, and the button raises. And I'm thinking to myself, behind John, I'm like, wow, there's just no way he really can continue on here. I'm looking, queen jack of diamonds. You've got a gut shot to the 9. There are 2 hearts out there. What can the guy really be raising with? It's usually, it's going to be a 2-pair type hand or a big draw. And not so much a big draw at 5-10. Although people when you're playing 5-10 with a $1,500 cap, that's when you start to see people making some more sophisticated moves. So I'm thinking to myself, well, you got to kind of dump this hand. Well, John calls. So I'm thinking to myself, well, this is interesting because I think this guy's got a flush draw or he's got 2-pair. Well, now the turn's the 3 of hearts. Well, now I'm thinking to myself, well, now he's just going to have to check and give up. Well, now John leads out onto the turn into his opponent. And when I asked John what he was trying to do, he was saying after we had completed our session, he said, I'm trying to represent the hearts now. And this is a mistake I've seen players make at this level, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the show, is getting frustrated with a hand that had medium showdown value, like queen jack on a queen 10-8 board. Getting raised, getting frustrated and staying in there, and now turning your hand into a bluff. It's almost like a mid-hand, slight mild tilt type of situation where I didn't like the fact that I was raised. I can still be good here on the flop. Well, now the heart comes. Well, it could be scary to the guy, so now I'm going to bet. It really, really becomes spewy. Because if you replay the hand in your head, what are the 2 hands that the guy can have? It's either hearts or 2-pair. And, honestly, if the guy's got queen 10 there and you bet out, he's not necessarily going to get full. He's not necessarily going to fold. If he had 10-8, a better player might fold. If he has a set, I don't think he's going to fold. But at these levels, I think he either has 2-pair or now you're betting right into him when he's made the flush, and I don't think he's folding anything. Obviously, he's not going to fold the flush, and I don't think he's folding 2-pair. Maybe a case some players might fold 10-8 or queen 10 in that spot. But again, at these levels, John took a hand that he probably should have pot controlled and turned it into a bluff because I think that he was confronted in the hand. And something I think went off in his head where he thought that he could be good. Maybe he didn't like the fact that he was getting raised, and now he's turning his hand into a bluff when the heart comes. And again, it's something that I see all the time at this level, and just be wary. Honestly, a lot of times I'm not even betting out with queen jack there on a queen 10-8 with 2 heart board. People say, well, I want to bet and see where I'm at. Well, I think that when you get comfortable with this game, I've actually really started getting very, very comfortable at the advanced level the last 6 months to go so far as to say I can check call and kind of see where I'm at by later street action. I never really necessarily have to put money in the pot to see where I'm at. I think that if you're picking up betting patterns against players, where if you check call a queen 10-8 board with queen jack, and now the turn, is a heart, and you check and the guy bets again, obviously it's an easy fold. You check, and the turn's a deuce, and now the guy bets again, there's just no way Queen Jack can be good in that spot, unless the guy is betting, with Queen 9. But that's one hand that you beat. As opposed to betting out, getting called by something like a King Queen, checking the turn, and now the guy bets, so now what do you do? Do you call there because the heart doesn't come? I'm just the point I'm trying to make is that I don't like the theory that I need to bet, quote unquote, to find out where I'm at in the hand. I think it's kind of a bad habit where at the lower levels for people that aren't super advanced, I guess I can see it, I can understand it. But as you play more and more, I think that you should start to develop your poker senses and start to read some betting patterns where you don't have to bet, quote unquote, to see where you're at. And with that, we are going to take a little break, and we will be back with Stud with Paul Darden right after this on Cash Plays.
Cash Plays. Previously on Big Poker Sundays.
All right, well, I'm not here to give you advice. Salsa plus dance plus man equals gay, says Adam. All right.
Yeah, not the ones who teach these classes, though. They're not gay. They're flaming
heteros?
Heteros. Their hands all over the girls, pretending to be gay, putting their hands all over them, watching the movie.
Oh, is that the angle? Is that the angle they shoot? They pretend to be gay, and then...
Yeah, of course.
Oh, that's how they win.
And then they do the flamenco.
Yeah.
Then your girl's gone. She's gone. Forget it.
Dancing with the Stars is ruining our society.
Yep.
For more with Bob and Huff, tune in to Big Poker Sundays every Sunday, only on PokerRoad.com. Cash Plays.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cash Plays. Stud with Paul Darden. This is an interesting episode of Cash Plays because we've talked about mixed games, but I obviously am a fan of Stud 8 or better and all the split block games like Omaha 8, but Stud High is a game that I kind of shy away from, and we're going to be talking to Paul about Stud High and Stud 8 or better. But before we even get into that, Paul, you're a guy that got a lot of attention back in 03 and 04. Tell us a little bit about how you came up, and a lot of people want to know about your relationship with Phil Ivey, playing Stud over there on the East Coast with him.
Well, like I said, it was definitely a good experience. Learned a lot. When it came to Stud, I feel I could play anyone. But I say just give me the guy that wrote the book, that developed the game. I know it ins and out, and that's how I became good friends with Phil Ivey, because we just rammed and jammed continuously in the game when we first started playing.
And was this the game, because I had heard that Ivey built a good portion of the bankroll 8160 like in Atlantic City? Is that
Yes.
basically what it was?
Yes.
Yeah. And did you guys talk about strategy once you got to know each other and about how to beat that game?
Well, for the most part in Stud, we would talk briefly a little bit, but we was on top of our Stud game. It's not too much that we can say to one another just about, all we could say is like the value bets, the getting in the extra bets and know when to save bets. Other than the actual game, we was pretty much all set in that department.
And I do have a couple of questions about value betting in Stud 8 and on Stud High and 7th Street. I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. Now, Larry Flint runs, he has that big, whatever it is, 2,000, 4,000, or 4,000, 8,000 stud game. And I hear Ivy sometimes puts in a bunch of people in that game. Have you ever had the opportunity to play in that game?
No, well, because I'm back and forth on the East and the West Coast, and I haven't played it yet or haven't really come up, but one day I get in it.
You get it?
Absolutely.
And was Ivy one of the best stud players over there on the East Coast at the time that you guys were playing together?
Yes.
He was?
Yes, indeed.
Let's talk a little bit about value betting, and let's talk about Stud High specifically. One of the questions I had written out where I'm a little bit lost in Stud High is if you have a two-pair hand and you've been leading against what is a draw on 7th Street, and you've got, say, a small two-pair where the guy is showing at least one or two door cards that are higher to your up pair, but you are pretty positive that he has a draw. Is that a check on the river, usually against a drawing hand?
Well, all depends. All depends how you play. If you know a man's on a draw hand, and you know that if you're gonna pay the hand off, if you check and he bet, you can definitely try to make the money if you take a chance of losing the money. My way to go at it is to look at your hand and almost look like you even bettered your hand and bet the hand. So if he had one pair that he had to pay it off, and if he make his hand, he's just going to simply call.
One of the other things too that I found a little bit interesting is if you started the hand with a high pair, like say you started with pocket aces or split aces or something like that, and you don't improve on 7th Street, you don't make 2 pair, and you think that there's a pretty good chance that he might have 2 pair. I guess a couple questions come into play here. Do you sometimes bet as a bluff with 1 high pair to get a guy to fold 2 small pair? And if you're in that position with 2 small pair and a guy has been leading at you the whole way with a high pair, how do you figure out if you're going to call or not on 7?
Well, like I said, you got to look at the cards, look at the game, and see, look at all the possibilities, the situation, see if his cards was dead, his other cards out, and look to see if he's trying to value bet. And if you didn't raise along the way, because if I had 2 pair, I would raise maybe 6th Street to see if he had 2 pair, see if he re-raised, and see how that plays out. And then maybe the river I still bet at him. You know what I mean? That's why I call value betting. And sometimes you might just check it. If you check in a blind, then you'll have to check it if you just only have 2 pair and you don't improve.
We had a guy on who works for one of the training sites, Deuces Cracked. His name is Joe Tall, and in some of the videos that he does, some of these instructional videos, he talks about raising and re-raising with the best draw in stud high. So sometimes I feel lost if I know I have the best high pair on the small betting streets like 3rd and 4th. I've got aces or kings, and now a guy puts my opponent, say we're heads up, he puts in a raise where I think he's got 2 pair.
Right.
In a cash game, are you 3-betting aces on 3rd and 4th versus a tournament? Are you playing more conservatively? I'm lost when I have a draw to the highest 2 pair.
Well, in cash game, you can definitely 3-bet it, and you got to lead out and hope you hit your pair. You're going to keep betting it. The bottom line is, if you don't, it's on 6th Street, you could bet, and then, again, like I said, in the river, if you don't make your hand, you can check it because you know he's going to call you if he has 2 pair. Or you can still bet right into him. He's still going to call you, but that's the risk you're taking, you know?
Now, in a tournament, again, where the chips are a little bit more valuable, you think you need to play conservative overall?
Definitely conservative, unless you're looking at the guy, chip stack, and he's short, and he's been running bad.
One of the things, too, that, I talk about techniques, and one of the reasons why I'm kind of intimidated by stud high is I don't feel that I have a great memory for the door cards, where I think the door cards in straight stud high might be a little bit more important than the stud 8. Is there some sort of technique that the great stud players have to do that, or does it just come with practice? Is there something that you use?
Well, it's just good you got to practice, and your memory got to stay sharp in stud. That's one of the hardest games, the stud games. That's how come everyone don't like to play it, all the young kids. They like in the no limit is easier to play, read, and the all-in factor.
In talking about no limit, too, because I was reading an article on Stud High where a guy basically said that stud was almost the most pure game in poker, where the good players have maybe with the exception of no limit cash games, where the best players have the greatest edge because of the extra betting round. Remember, in stud, there's 2 small and 3 bigs.
Right.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's true. Like I said, if you play stud and know how to play it, overall you'll overcome it. And like I said, if you know how to play it well and know how to value bet, you will win way more money than you'll lose. When you know how to make the extra bets and value bets, once you get on your rush, you'll win 5 times as much as a player that don't know how.
Couple of specific questions, and obviously this is going to be player dependent, but I want to kind of get a sense, because I think, again, beginning players might be a little bit lost in situations. Let's say that you have a door card on 3rd Street that's lower than a couple of other door cards to your left, and say you've got split jacks with a king or a queen to your left. How do you normally approach that if, say, you do have an overcard or say you don't have an overcard?
Well, like I said, it's pending how you're running that day, who's behind you. You got aggressive player or conservative player behind you. So, like I said, it's all pending. Mm-hmm. You know, every situation is different when you're playing a game.
If you have, say, a guy that you know probably won't call or 3-bet unless he's got like a split higher door card, you're not afraid to, say, raise it up with jacks if he's got a king to your left.
No, because like I said, he's giving you information, so it's good to do that so you know where you're at all the time.
Mm-hmm. And one of the other things too is if you have the highest door card out there and a guy raises into you, and you say 2 different situations. Let's say you've got a king and a guy with a lower door card to your right raises into you. You've got A, maybe a flush draw, or B, maybe a split pair. Is there a case to smooth call sometimes with a split pair, smooth call with a flush draw, and sometimes a case maybe where you re-raise with a flush draw if the guy is weak to your right?
Well, no. If he raise in front of you, he's letting you know that he's not afraid, that he has an overpair, or on you, and that's giving you again information where you can smooth call in any event. And see how the hand play out. Even if you have split kings, you can wait and see, hope to hit 2 pair, and check to him. If he bet, you can re-raise him. There's all kinds of ways to play that hand, but he give his hand away when he raise in front of you because he representing more so that he has an overpair or maybe trips.
And let's talk about the playability of drawing hands on 3rd Street. When you're looking and say you got a 3 flush, again, for beginning players, you got a 3 flush, maybe there are 2 cards that are dead, 2 flush cards that are dead out there, or you've got a high 3 straight, and maybe there's 1 dead on the bottom end and 1 dead on the top end. What are you looking for? Is there a rule that you have in your head in terms of playing flush draws? Obviously, you want to have overcards and stuff to maybe a guy that opens through, but what do you usually look at when you try to play your flush draws in terms of the amount of dead cards that are out there?
Well, like I said, yeah, you want to play with all clean cards. Mm-hmm. You want to play if someone comes in, you want to play over cards, you know what I'm saying? You want to have at least out of your 3 flush cards, the biggest card on the board. And like I said, it's situational. You want to have position. You want to see who stayed in and who went out, you know what I mean? Because sometimes it doesn't, it don't benefit you by even messing with the hand.
Okay. And when you have a very, very strong, say, 3-card draw hand on 3rd, like maybe 3 cards to a straight flush, 3 cards to a flush with the gap straight, something like that. Let's talk about 4th Street play. It's the small betting round. Now you maybe hit a total brick. And now the guy hits good in the sense that he hits an overcard, or maybe he hits an open pair. Is that a spot? Like I said, I get a little lost as when can I continue? When I have a monster draw, can I almost always continue on 4th on that small betting round?
Well, it depends. If a man hits his door card, just give it away,
Really?
Surrender. Absolutely. And then other times, it all depends how aggressive you played, when it was 3 cards. Was it raising you just call, or re-raise? Like I said, everything is situational. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Are all your cards clean? You know what I mean? Did you see any of the hard out, or did you see any of your straight cards out? You know what I mean? It get all dependable.
And I'm trying to think of, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to think of a situation where maybe the guy hits an open pair on 4, where you might be able to continue with a big draw. Say a guy raised with a low card, where you're almost positive that he's got a big pair underneath.
Right.
Because, he raised with a 4 into a bunch of big cards. Now he hits an open pair on 4, where you're pretty sure right now he's got maybe at least jacks or queens up.
Right.
you have an overcard plus a big draw to the possibility of, possibly being able, if you stick around on 4, to make a pair on 5, where now maybe your 2 pair out is good as well. Is that something that you might continue on, or you just...
Well, like I said, everything is situational. Sometimes you play it, sometimes you give it up. Like I say, you got to take, when you play poker, everything in factor, you know what I mean? It's like how you been running over this player, how this player has been running over you, the table and everything. Like I said, everything's situational. How you been doing that day? Has you been winning, or do you want to take a chance? Because like I said, if you could get rid of a hand early, and versus, if you ever hit a hand, you'll never feel good about raising it. I feel that you should give it up, release it early.
It's really interesting because I've had a lot of guys on here that talk about playing heads up no limit, and they talk about momentum, and they talk about table image and how you've been doing previously. You're playing a guy heads up and no limit, and you're up 2 buy-ins, and that helps you out in the way that you're playing in your opponent. Now, I haven't heard anybody talk about it in limit games, but you kind of feel like if you're running hot or if your image is good, maybe opponents don't want to mess with you as much, where you might get involved in some hands where if you had been losing, you won't.
Right. Like I said, if you're playing up against good players, they'll take all that into consideration. If you're playing a bad player or a new player that really don't know, he's going to keep coming, and, poker will be a good day for you.
Yeah. Talk about some of the biggest mistakes that it got when we were over at Foxwoods. I see that 75-150 stud game goes, quite a bit. Or we were playing, 1-2 rotation HOE or 150-300 HOE or HOSE. Right. And there were a couple guys that were obvious fish in the game. Okay, not just in stud, but in every game. But specifically in stud, the guys that are the ones that are the live ones, what are the biggest mistakes that they make that a good player, say, capitalizes on?
Well, what they do, they keep drawing to slim to none, hoping they catch that inside straight or that flush when they see already 10 of the suit is already out and they still going for it. And sometimes that will make another guy, they don't catch, but another player catch, by changing the cards in the rotation.
So it's almost a sense where they're just not really paying attention to the door cards and they're just looking at their own hand.
Right. They don't play your hand. They just constantly play their hand trying to improve it.
Now let's talk about the difference between a guy. The amazing thing at Foxwoods was that there were 5, 6, 10, 20 stud games going and a few 20, 40 stud games going, and then 1 or 2 75, 150s going. What about those guys that are stuck at, say, 10, 20 stud that obviously have some fundamental concept of the game that are looking at door cards? What's the difference between those guys, those mediocre guys, and the guys that can consistently win at your level?
Well, like I said, it's basically how comfortable a player is. You know what I'm saying? His bankroll is everything, and, and what he want to do. Like I said, everyone don't want to continuously play higher. Mm-hmm. They just want to play nice and comfortable, enjoy the game, and grind out, a nice piece of money for themselves.
Do you think that the players at that level, what we talked about earlier on, are missing those thin value bets that, say, you or Phil, made, those extra bets?
Oh, absolutely. Some of them, they run good, and they just, they card magnets. They just always catch, but they don't know how to value bet, and they might make $200,000 a year where they could be making $5 if they knew how to get their money in.
Well, that was definitely interesting stuff on Stud High. Now, moving over to the game that's kind of something that I really, really like to play, and we've played a lot of OE together, Stud 8 or better. And in Stud 8 or better, I think that there's a couple spots. Again, I've played the game a lot, but I seem to sometimes get lost. And a lot of times it's the play of high hands. And I wonder if, Paul, if I'm too disciplined with myself, because I came from an old school of thought where if I have a split pair in Stud 8 or better, and somebody has a higher door card to my left, or an ace, I don't get involved. Do you think that that's fundamentally correct? Am I giving up a little value?
No, absolutely. Like I said, my thing is I don't even think about playing 9s through kings. Uh-huh. I muck them unless it's situational where everybody folds and I have it and there's a small card, I might put a raise out there, or I might not even. I might just smooth call, because if everybody folded and they had high cards, I know it's a bunch of small cards in the deck. So I just limp and see if he catch bad, and then I may bet.
So, if a guy is got split queens or so you're saying that, let's say you were second to act with split kings and there was no ace to your left, but there were 4 or 5 people with a bunch of low cards, you might just not get involved with the hand there.
Well, it is dependable. It all depends. If I have like split kings, I have to have a small piece, meaning ace through 5, or maybe a 6 sometime, and 2 suited. I might limp, or I might raise, because there's so many small cards. I'm like, everybody ain't gonna be on that draw. If everybody do, they're gonna catch bricks.
Right.
And like I said, everything is situational. You know what I'm saying? The feeling and seeing how you want to do a play, how you're running, and like I said, you can raise and see who stays in and who goes out, and see what 4th Street do, because 4th Street is very important. Because if I were to have that hand split kings, I say with a 5, and I catch a jack on 4th Street, and somebody catches a deuce, and they had a 3 up, you know what I'm saying, I'm going to check. If they bet, I may, you know what I'm saying, I probably muck it right then and there, because it's one raise and I could get away from it, because I don't want to continue the hand to just play to break even to get my money back or lose it all.
And that's interesting, because I think that's something a lot of people don't realize. So you're saying that a king 5 in stud 8 or better is a lot more powerful than if you had, say, king 9 or king 10, because I think a lot of people get lost and they think, well, king 10 gives me the extra outs of making Broadway later on, but 5 is a straight blocker for those guys down there, right?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me to the other question too. Let's say that you were in in a steal spot, or it got folded around you and you had split kings and you raised it up, and let's say the bring in, or one guy defended with a low card. Say you raised up with like a king 6 and the guy defended with a 3. Now you brick off, or maybe you catch a low card that doesn't look like it's going to help your board, and he catches a small straightening card. He catches a deuce, or he catches a 5, or maybe he catches a 6, and your head's up. I guess the question becomes is, I've kind of proceeded on as check calling 4, and if I don't make kings up on 5 and he hits another low card, I'm done with the hand.
Right.
Now,
absolutely.
What happens if you make kings up on 5 and now he's got 3 open cards to a straight?
Well, again, like I said, now is what you want to do, and the 3 cards you got, was they all live and no one else had them cards? And again, like I said, you can, how you been running, you can call, and then 6th Street. If 6th Street, if he catch bad, you still got to check to him and give him a free card to the river. Or like I said, if he catch good, you're giving up 6th Street. But my thing is, 5th Street, I would check and give it up. Because like I said, you're still just trying to play to get your money back, or you to lose it all. Because you're never going to get all of his, especially if he's a good, solid player.
So you're saying that even if you make a 2-pair hand on 5, if his board is scary enough, like maybe like a deuce 3-4, and you don't have like king 5, sometimes you don't even get involved. You don't even get involved continuing on with the hand.
No, like I said, no, that's the difference, where you have the edge on the game, where you could give it up and give it up early, versus they keep calling with that hand and you be free rolling it. I just don't like to play poker that way. I don't like to play where you free rolling. It's just like trying to go to a gunfight with no gun. Right.
The other thing too that they talk about is, it's almost, they say, unless something really crazy happens, it's almost never correct if you call 5 and straight stud high to fold 6. Now, is that the case with stud 8 or better as well?
Well, like I said, it is a little different, because it depends what the person catch on 6. But again, like I said, I would give it up 5. Yeah. And, if I feel as a man is possibly free rolling on me, I don't like that feeling. I'm not gonna never get comfortable with that feeling.
Do you think that 5th Street and stud 8 or better is by far? Do you think it's the most important street?
Well, absolutely. That and 7th Street, them always the most important streets of the game.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
One of the things that I noticed in my game where I think I'm picking up, and I think a lot of other people miss out on, is if I'm against what is a high hand, like a guy raises with a split queen, and maybe I defend my bring-in, and it looks like I'm going low. It looks like I defend it with a 3, and then I catch a low card, and he bets and I call. Maybe then I catch, or he checks, I bet, and he calls. And maybe I catch a brick, and he bets and I call. And then on 6, I catch a low card.
Right.
And he checks, and I bet, and he calls. Now, so it looks like I'm going low, and it looks like he's going high, right? But because I caught that brick on 5 and he let into me, if I make 2 small pair on 7 and he checks to me, I see a lot of guys check behind there with 2 small pair on 7 when I think it's almost an easy value bet because, yeah, they're going to call you with 2 high pair,
right,
but they're also going to call you with 1 pair, right?
Absolutely, and that's the difference in playing with seasoned players and beginners.
Yeah. So you like to definitely value bet 2 small pair in that spot?
Well, like my attitude if I know I'm going to call and take a chance of losing the money, I just don't see why the earth would I check it and not take a chance to win the money.
Right, because you're going to check all it anyways, right? It definitely makes sense. Another spot here where I see people, and I saw it in the horse tournament a ton, a guy's going high, he raises it up with maybe a split pair or something like that, or let's say you raise it up with a 7, but you got pocket kings underneath,
right? And
a guy calls with a 3, and now on 4 he catches an ace. Again, old school people at the bike who grind out that 20-40 high-low game, I'm not saying necessarily it's right. I learned from a guy that said if you're going high and a guy from low catches an ace, then you just get out on 4.
Right. And why even bother? Unless you catch a king, you might peel in.
Right. With 3 kings, right?
Absolutely.
Because the guy's either got, 4 to a low or a pair of aces, right?
Right. And then sometime is all could be deceptive, where he might have a overpair in the hole as well and try to bet and bluff you off the hand.
Right. One of the other things, too, is, of course, again, in straight stud high, the door cards are very, very important. In stud 8, the door cards are important. And let's talk about when they become really important. If you're in there with a hand where you've got like a 7 up, let's say you've got 5, 7, 8, okay, which is definitely a raggy low, but it's 3 cards to a gap straight. Somebody's in there with a lower card, like maybe somebody raises and somebody calls with a lower card, and now you see 2 6s are dead, and maybe a couple of 4s are dead.
Well, like I said, and when you're playing stud high low, I don't even dream about playing an 8 low. I have to back into it down the road, and I don't too much like it, but I'm not playing an 8 low. That's a hand that just can only burn you.
Now, or I'll give you a more kind of cutting example. Let's say you've got 3, 4, 6, and there are 3 5s that are dead out in the field. Does that hand become now marginally playable?
They don't come marginally. It's a throwaway.
It's a throwaway, okay. That's how important those dead cards are out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You're going to try to catch to just get it almost half. You don't want to play that kind of poker.
3 cards to a low straight, or 3 cards under 8 to a flush.
Yes.
Deuce 5, 7, deuce 5, 8. Let's specifically talk about Raz hands to a low flush, where your flush cards are live. You've got a lot of action in front of you. Maybe this has to do with how you're doing that day, but do you ever put in an extra bet, almost kind of for value, with 3 cards to a low flush?
No, not right there. Not if it's been ram jam in front of you, because somebody might have a set, and you'll have three bigger flush cards. So no, if you're gonna gamble and call, see and try to catch good before you get too radical.
What types of hands are you raising usually on 3rd Street? Obviously, again, this is going to depend, but premium low hands where your cards are live, like a 3, 4, 5. Sometimes some people go through the school of thought where if your hand is so good, like 3, 4, 5 or 3, 4, 6 suited with all your live cards, that they want people in there, that they don't raise with those hands.
Right, yeah. Like I said, yeah, that's definitely situational. All depends what type of lineup you got. If you got an action lineup, you can go ahead and gamble. If you got a tight one, yeah, you could be conservative and see, hope to catch good and let them catch. You know what I'm saying? And try to get the money in at the best time. I mean, get them stuck. But, that's all, like I said, depending on what type of field you're up against.
One of the other things that I sometimes get lost and studied or better, and I see people, play really strangely, is split aces. Split aces with a brick. Ace, ace, 10. And you're up against maybe 2 or 3 people that have low cards. You've got ace, ace, 10. You put in a raise and they call. Now you catch like a 9 or a brick, and they catch good. Is there any difference now between that hand, ace, ace, 10, 9, versus king, king, jack, 10 now? Or king, king, 9, 8, something like that?
No, it's the same difference. Like I said, because your aces, you're a little more comfortable. But like I said, you still got to check at 4th Street, and they both catch good on 5th Street. You still, if you're trying to play to win and play strong, you got to reevaluate, know the field you're playing against. And like I said, no, do you want to call and get stuck where you just drawing to get half or no money?
Right.
Like I said, is you got to put everything into the box and go over it.
Because you might make aces up on 5,
right?
But a guy's board might be 5, 6, 7, 4, 5, 6, something like that. I guess you wouldn't necessarily be as concerned if it was something like deuce 3, 4, if there are a couple 5s out and you have a couple of the aces. But I see what you mean. Now, when we talked about those fish at stud, let's talk about those guys that don't play well in study. They're better in the rotation. Where do you think they make the mistakes? I see them playing a lot of kind of razzy hands.
Yeah, they like I said, they play any big pair. Any 8 low. Any 3-card flush. Like if I have king, deuce, jack, or diamonds, is in a muck. I don't want to go for that hand because, you catch that 4 diamond, you're going to the river. And like I said, again, you're playing for basically half the money if you're up against low hands.
Actually, it's a good thing you actually brought that hand up because this is another spot that I see played differently from person to person. Not king, jack, deuce of diamonds, but how about king, 3, 5 of diamonds or 9, ace, deuce of diamonds with a 9 up. Let's say you've got a high card up that's a banana.
Right.
And if you call a raise or you limp in, do you think you're almost playing your hand face up if the other players know you're halfway decent? I limp in with the 9 of hearts or, what can I possibly have there except for maybe 2 baby flush cards underneath? You know what I mean?
Well, no, sometimes the players think that you have a big pair of the 9s or whatever. But like I said, it's depending on your lineup and see how they play at you if you catch good. If they check or whatever, be conservative. Like I said, you are seeing play, and you'll see how they play. It simply come to you. You know what you up against, and if you got a real player, he'll know where you're at.
So, do you sometimes play those types of hands on 3? How about take the ace out? Would you play a banana, say 4, 5 suited if all your flush cards were live? Is that sometimes a playable hand?
No, it's a playable hand all the time, especially if you got the 4, 5 in the hole, or even if you have a 5 up and a 9 down underneath. Because, like I said, they don't know where you at. They're just thinking where you're at. They're guessing. But like I said, you could definitely gamble that hand because you got 2 ways versus just 1.
Right. And, of course, if there's, say, 2 suited cards of your suit that are below 8 or maybe even 1, the hand becomes unplayable right out in the field on 3rd.
Right.
Yeah. When you have a hand, I'm trying to give an example like and again, sometimes this is where I get lost with door cards. If you have what looks like an extremely premium hand, like an ace deuce 4, but like maybe 2 or 3 of the 3s are dead and a couple of the 5s are dead, Can the door cards dictate that what looks like a premium hand now becomes unplayable? Can it become that extreme?
Well, like I said, it all depends. Are they to bring in and what happened? Because, like, for me, for instance, if I have, like, a 4 showing and I got ace, deuce, 4, and there's a couple of 5s and 3s are out, and I look behind me, depending on what card's behind me, because there's a bunch of junk, or it might be a face card or whatever, I might still try to raise it just to win it right there, just to pick up the blinds and ante, you know what I mean? Well, not the blinds, the antes.
Right, the antes.
And then bring it,
right.
But, yeah, you know what I'm saying? So everything is situational, because if somebody call or raise you or whatever, you still have a low draw. You just, you're going to peel anyway. But like I said, that's all pending.
And when you're the bring-in, this is kind of another unique situation. When you bring it in with a low card, and it gets folded around to, let's tag this guy, because I know it all depends on the player, an aggressive guy who likes to steal a lot of bring-ins. And say you got a banana and an ace under there, like an ace, queen, deuce. Is that a hand that you might defend your bring-in with against an aggressive player?
Well, all depends what's his door card he's raising with.
Maybe he's got a high door card, like a 10 or a jack.
Well, yeah, you definitely play, especially if you got the ace underneath, because he could think you're having the three small cards. When you hit the queen, you done made queens, and you don't know what it, depending on what his overcard is, however, but now you're ready to gamble. You're going to peel and see what develops.
Right. Now, what if a guy like that, he's raising with a small card because he just kind of want to make, maybe he's raising with a 6 or 7. Does that change the spot too?
Well, like I said, again, if you had a deuce showing or whatever, he thinking, you got 3 small cards, and depending on what are the other cards out, he could have been raising with just a big pocket pair or split 3s with a jack or anything. Or he could, like I said, 4th Street is very key and important, and sometimes, like I said, if you hit that pair where they won't think of it, they thinking you brick when, hey, you halfway hit semi-gin.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You'll go a little further with the hand, because he might think in one way and you're totally another way, where, like I said, he might have that big pair as well sometimes. Sometimes it's, you got to play on instincts and feeling, but you can't always play like super tight one way. You got to mix it up some as well.
I had a guy make a move on me on 5th Street in one of these horse tournaments, and it's something that I started to think about, and I wonder if it's something that you do in your game, where he had a low. On 5th Street, he caught 3 low cards, and I caught 3 low cards. He checked to me on 5th Street, but he had an absolute board lock on low. He had perfect in the hole where he actually had the best possible low. And he check raised me on 5. And he had a gut shot to a straight, and he got there on 7, and I ended up losing a big pot. Do you ever play a hand deceptively where you check raise on 5 when you know that you absolutely have a lock on a low against another low hand?
No, you're losing money that way.
You are.
Yeah, why try to check raise and if the guy didn't hit, or he's more conservative? Like I say, you might do it with an aggressive player, but that's not even a good thing to do then. In study the better. It's not about giving away free cards and trying to check raises, getting the money.
So you think that you lose value in the sense that so many times a guy might check behind when he sees that you have the possibility of a better low, as opposed to just betting out, right? Right. And don't give the guy a chance to check behind.
Right. You bet out then, and then 6th Street. Like if you have like a 3, 5, 6 showing, and you made the straight and 5, and the guy checked to you, and you checked to him, and you already got the made 6 straight. Now you know what I mean? Now my thing is to bet it versus checking it, you know what I'm saying? Now if he call, now you're hoping to catch a king on 6th Street, and he catch good where he had betting than you thinking you might have brick.
Right.
And now you can raise them,
Well, I saw, a lot of times too, also in these horse events where a guy, he'd make a straight, and I would catch bad, on 6, exactly what you're talking about, and he would check it. Well, actually, I had a spot in the 3,000 horse where I had, too high pair, and he probably could have got an extra bet on me. But instead, he went ahead and checked 5 or checked 6 when he made his, 65 straight and lost a bet.
Right. Well, like I said, that's the inexperience where they don't know. They think they want you to get there, but they don't realize if you're just playing that super good, you're going to give them more money. They just lose out money,
Absolutely. Well, I hope you guys all enjoyed that. Paul, I want to thank you for... I've been hounding Paul to come on the show now for the last 2 weeks. He probably wants to kill me, but we're both playing... when we're recording this right now, we're actually both playing in the main event tomorrow. Because, like I said, I'm backlogging a lot of these interviews. So, Paul was on Poker Road Radio a couple months ago in Foxwoods. You can check that episode out. And, Paul, thanks again for coming on the show and talking
no problem.
Some stud strategy.
Right, absolutely, To the poker world, y'all, to listen and take heed to what's being said, because you're getting it from the truth, and if you want money and like it, you'll play like the truth.
All right, the truth. Well, that's going to wrap things up here. We will see you next week right here on Cash Plays.